Here. Will all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I hope everybody can almost see the flag around the screen. And then we'll have Kim Harbaugh with the First Gospel Temple Church to give a prayer. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Father, I thank you for the opportunity that we can gather here today. I'm mindful of the Word of God that declares that, first of all, with prayers and supplication, intercession, and giving of thanks, to be made known for all men, those who are in authority, those who are in positions to make decisions. It's our responsibility to pray, and so I come here today and I pray for all the decision making that needs to be done in this room. I just thank you for the wisdom and the authority that you have granted unto us. I'm always mindful of the authority that you have invested in us to be leaders of our own community. Now I thank you for guidance and for your help and for restoration in all things as we work together as one in unity. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I would like to welcome everybody here today for the State of the County Finances presented by the Preble County Budget Commission. And I've also asked Larry Long, the CCAO Executive Director, to be with us today to maybe give some insights on where the state is going with some of the projections in the future. And before we get started, before I turn it over to Marty, for Larry's sake, could we please go around the room and identify who we are and who we're with so Larry may know who's here. So you know the three commissioners pretty well. Marty, Votel.
Yes, Mindy Robbins, County Auditor. I've heard of you for a long time.
Don't believe everything you hear.
Linda White, County Treasurer, and I've heard of you too.
I don't know if you're not. Kyle Cross, County Engineer.
Butch Hildebrand, County Engineer's Office.
Chris Washington, Clerk of Courts. I don't know who you are.
Hey, Bruzo, County Clerk.
I'm Alice Florin, Court Administrator in Preble County Commission.
Sheriff Mike Simpson.
Mike Spitler. Jeff Golden.
And it's great to be down.
Yeah, well, glad to have you here. Larry's been with CCAO 37 years? 39?
Yeah, they broke the child labor laws for me.
And Larry just announced his retirement not long ago, so he's going to be missed, but brings a wealth of experience to the County Commissioners Association. So with that, I will turn this over for Marty for a presentation.
Does it take care of the glare problem?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, thanks. I'm Marty Votel, County Prosecutor. As County Prosecutor, I'm the Chairman of the Budget Commission. The Budget Commission has a lot of responsibilities. The most important of them is to certificate available revenue. If money is certificated, the County Commission can spend it. If revenue is not certificated, it can't be spent. And so every year when we certificate that amount, that is a matter of some importance to the County Commission, and it's a matter of some importance to you as independently elected officials in your budget. The County Commission asked the Budget Commission to give a presentation today about the state of county finances, and I appreciate the invitation and thank you for it. Today I'm going to be talking strictly about the revenue side of the ledger, the money that's coming into the county. I will not be speaking about the expenditure side, the money that's being spent, how much, where, etc., because that's not the province of the County Budget Commission. That discretion belongs and is invested in the County Commission. Today, I'm going to talk about where we've been in the county in the past couple years, revenue-wise, where we think we are today in 2013, and where we may be in the next few years. What you should take from this talk is, while we all remain optimistic, it is the Budget Commission's estimation that there's no reason to believe that county revenue is going to substantially or appreciably increase either this year or in the next few years. We're going to start by taking a look at the state of Ohio in general, and I'm sure Mr. Long can speak more knowledgeably about this. But you all remember the recession in 2009 saw an 11% reduction in the general revenue fund of the state. The following year, 2010, revenues were down from 2008 by 16.5% at $16.2 billion. That's when Governor Kasich was elected, and you'll remember he and the legislature had to pass a biennial budget to bridge an approximate $8 billion budget gap. And some of those decisions that they made and some of those laws that were passed affect us here in Preble County. We'll talk about that in a bit. 2011, general revenue fund went up to $17.7 billion. Last fiscal year, $19 billion. And this fiscal year, through just February, back up to $19.4 billion, 2008 levels. So there's some reason to be optimistic on the state level. Unemployment is down to 7% in the state of Ohio. 2012, 90,000 jobs were added. The Office of Budget and Management just increased their estimate of 2013 revenues by approximately $450 million. Those are positive economic indicators. And it begs the question, are we part of that recovery in Preble County? Are we seeing those type of numbers here? Unfortunately, the answer seems to be no. 2008, you'll see the numbers in yellow there, demonstrate the effect of the recession here locally. 2008, we had an $11 million appropriation or expenditure. 2009, $8.9 million approximately. That is a 19% budget cut in 1 year, and everyone in here remembers the painful cuts that we were all required to make at that time. The good news is those cuts reversed what had been a trend of, I'll call it deficit spending in the county. Four of the five prior years were characterized by expenditures exceeding yearly revenues. The bad news is that if you look at the revenues that have been brought in since 2009, 10, 11, 12, they're by and large stable and steady, 9.3 million, 9.7, 9.9, 9.2. There is no demonstrated pattern of strong financial growth year by year by year like we are seeing on the state level. Here's a pictographic representation of that. This is from David Westler's State of the County address, and I appreciate him allowing me to use his work. It does demonstrate that these expenditures in blue exceeded revenues in 2005 through 8 in general, and then after the recession, when those revenues went down, by and large the revenues are exceeding expenditures year by year, with the exception of last year. How much have we certificated, the Budget Commission certificated for this year, 2013? That number is $8.8 million, down off the $9.2 million of actual revenue last year. A couple of things to consider when we're looking at this certificated amount. Number one, this amount is an estimate. It's a revenue forecast made by the Budget Commission last fall. In other words, the estimate is made before 1 cent of actual revenue is received. Another thing to consider is that our philosophy is and always has been that we are going to be conservative with respect to the amount of money that we certificate. It would be irresponsible to err on the side of optimism, certificate money as available, giving the green light to the Commission to rely on that estimate and to spend it. If that money doesn't come in, you're in trouble. These estimates are conservative, all of them. And it's also important to remember that that estimate, that certification that's made at the beginning of the year is subject to amendment up or down at any time. We look at the revenues as they're coming in all year from all sources, and we adjust and have the authority to adjust this certificated amount up or down depending on how our estimates are comparing with actual receipts. What is the general revenue fund? When we look at the general revenue fund of the county, this $8.8 million, fully half of it comes from local sales tax. A quarter of it comes from property taxes, and the remaining quarter is comprised of different sources of income. So when you look at this, 75% of general fund money in our county is sales tax and property tax, period. Well, how have these individual sources of income, these big five as we've been calling them, the big five are obviously the sales and property tax, and we've called included in that county services, interest on income, and local government funds. Some of those don't even deserve to be included in the big five anymore, interest income, because the money has fallen off so dramatically they really don't contribute much to local revenues. But let's look at the big five over the past 5 or so years and see what trends we can identify here in Preble County. The sales tax, you can see in 2009, the recession, we lost about $500,000 in sales tax revenue from 2008 and 2009, and it's basically been a story of recovery since then. between $4 million and $5 million in the past 4 or 5 years. This year, we've certificated $4,265,000, a bit down from the actual receipts of last year of $4,600,000. There simply is no trend to suggest that more money is going to come in this year than it did last year. That's our conservative beginning of the year estimate. Property taxes, you can see here, they're pretty much pegged at $2.2 million a year, 2009, 10, 11, 12. This year, our beginning estimate was $2 million, a bit down from the typical $2.2 million. And I want to tell you just very briefly how we estimate these property tax numbers, because they are so significant. We receive a property tax settlement twice a year, once in March, once in August. We made this estimated certificate of $2 million, again, before any of this money was received. We received our March settlement in this year of approximately $1 million. Looking over the 5-year trend, the second half settlements, the one that we receive in August, are typically down about 17% when compared to first half settlements. If that trend continues, we anticipate about $862,000 being brought in our second half settlement, or a total annual property tax receipt in 2013 of $1.9 million. Now, we add to that estimate something called state reimbursements. Those are estimated at about $300,000 this year. The state has the homestead exemption, the 10% rollback tax credit, the owner-occupier tax credit. These are property taxes that the owners and occupiers don't have to pay, and the state reimburses the county for those lost revenues after the fact. Those programs in total, we estimate the state's going to pay a reimbursement of $300,000 this year. Add that to the $1.9 million, and just like clockwork, it's looking like $2.2 million is going to come in. So our initial estimate of $2 million, again being conservative, is likely going to be revised upward by $100,000 or $200,000 before the end of the year. But again, no trend that property taxes are going to increase, or that we can anticipate they're going to increase this year or in the next several years. Charges for services, another steady source of income. About $1.2 million a year comes in. Obviously in 2009, all these graphs are showing the effect of the recession on income from all sources. We're wagering, again, $1.2 million this year. If you look at recent history, the past 8 years, there's only been a 10% variation over that entire span of time. $1.2 million plus or minus 10%. No reason to believe it's going to be greater than the $1.2 million that we've seen. Local government funds, now here's where we start to see the effect of the biennial budget that was passed in 2010, the local effect on our receipts and the money we can use to serve our constituents. If you look at this graph, it shows you the amount of local government funds for Preble County. The state distributes local government funds to the county distributes that money pursuant to an alternative formula. The county gets to keep some, and some of it gets distributed to municipalities and townships. This graph demonstrates the money that the county gets to keep year by year by year. And you can see before the recession, we were enjoying about $850,000 a year for county use. The recession comes in, and about $150,000 that is knocked off. We're at $700,000. And then we see the effect of this biennial budget back in 2010, where local government funds are reduced even further, and reduced even further this year. And I'll talk about that very generally. Try not to go into too much gory detail about how this stuff is calculated, but in Preble County, this number here, $825,000, that's the amount the Ohio Department of Taxation estimated that our county in total will receive in 2013. So you apply that alternative formula which says, hey, the county gets to keep 47% of that amount. You calculate that out, and it looks like $388,000. How much has the local budget commission certificated with respect to local government funds? The answer, $194,000, or half of that. Why? That bears explanation. Well, before 2012, those local government funds, that $850,000 that you were seeing year after year after year, was calculated based on a percent of the state general revenue fund, the sales tax receipts statewide that were being received in Columbus. As part of that biennial budget, the state, many would argue, helped to balance that budget and bridge that $8 billion deficit on the backs of the local political subdivisions, taking away the money that we otherwise would have gotten. And they did that by fixing the local government fund distribution at the 2011 fiscal year amount. And then they said, well, in fiscal year 2012, you'll get 75% of that amount. In fiscal year 2013, you'll get 57 or 50% of that amount. And that's why we're seeing on that graph, the 700,000 becomes the 500,000, becomes best case scenario of $388,000. Well, how come we're cutting that number in half with our certificate this year? The reason has to do with the fiscal year. The state fiscal year runs from July the 1st to June the 30th of the subsequent year. It kind of straddles the calendar year. Here in Preble County, our fiscal year is the calendar year. So this fix in the biennial budget in 2010 comes to an end June the 30th of this year. What happens at that point? Well, the law says beginning July the 1st, we're going to calculate a new percentage of distribution to everybody. We're going to tie in those distributions to the sales tax once again. And we're going to calculate that in July of 2013. So some would argue, and I had discussions with Mindy, she's been very involved in her Auditors Association. Many auditors are saying, well, hey, we'll go ahead and certificate that entire amount because after all, it is the estimate we're receiving from the Ohio Department of Taxation. And other auditors are saying, well, given the fact that the way these distributions are made is going to change in July of this year, midway through the year, we'll certificate the half we know we're going to get, and we'll wait and see what that formula looks like and what those monies look like, and take another look at it in the second half of the year. So again, our philosophy always being conservative, we took the later route and said, we're going to certificate $194,000, but we hope we're going to get $388,000. That's a number we're going to take a look at later. In any case, it's a significant reduction from the local government funds that were received last year, which itself was a significant reduction in the funds that were received in the preceding year. Interest income, anybody here who has a checking account or a savings account or a money market account knows there's no such thing anymore, right? Back in 2007, the county was making almost $800,000 in interest income on county assets. Last year, $100,000. Significant reduction in revenue that we used to be able to count on. So where are we now in 2013? As I indicated, the certificated amount at this point is $8.8 million. Looking at, the big five, these are 2012 actuals, I hope you can see that on the slide, versus our estimates. Interest remaining steady at $100,000, local government funds dropping off, worst case scenario, to $200,000 roughly. Sales taxes not growing, service income not growing, property taxes not growing. Revenues are stagnant. So that begs the question, well, are there any other sources of income that maybe we can look to brighten the picture a bit? And the answer is a qualified yes. Casino tax revenues. We're all familiar with a couple years ago, the Ohio Constitution was amended, gave permission for 4 casinos to be built across the state, Cincinnati, Columbus, Toledo, and Cleveland. And what it said was 33% of the net profits from those casinos is going to get paid into it's going to be collected by the state, and 51% of that money is going to be put into a county fund to be distributed to all the counties in the state of Ohio based on population. Those disbursements are made quarterly, and it's important to note that those disbursements do not include what's called a racino money. Everybody knows there are thoroughbred racetracks and harness racetracks across the state of Ohio that have applied for and been given permission to install VLTs, video lottery terminals, which are essentially slot machines. The revenues from those slot machines at racinos is not going to be included in this casino tax revenue, and that's adding some uncertainty to how these revenues are going to come in as racinos open up and customers who otherwise would have gone to the casinos spend their gambling dollars at the racinos, which aren't distributed to the counties. We received from a man named Mike Sobel, who is the former Ohio Department of Taxation Tax Analysis Division Chief, some estimates of what he thought these numbers were going to look like. Our first disbursement was in July of last year because the casinos opened up in the spring. Some of them did. The Cincinnati one just opened up a couple weeks ago, so these numbers are in flux. But his estimates were that in July, our first quarterly distribution would be $28,000. We exceeded that by 28%, brought in $36,000. Our October quarterly distribution, he estimated $86,000. We fell short of that by 15%, brought in $73,000. January, we fell short by 9% of his estimates at $97,000. And then as you can see, obviously we don't have our April distribution yet, but the estimates anticipate increasing casino revenue to Preble County as these casinos open up and prosper. But again, those amounts are unknown. The last casino just opened. The effect of the racinos as of yet is unknown. It's literally going to take about 2 years before we have some indication reliably of how these funds are going to come in and can make a more realistic and more accurate estimate of receipts. This year, we're estimating $371,000. That's a conservative estimate. As with anything else, it's subject to an amendment at a later date and time. This amount obviously is going to help offset some of the losses to interest income, local government income, things of that nature, but is not going to make up for it. Another source of county revenue has been the conveyance fee. Back in September of 2009, the county put a 1 mil or a 0.1% fee on all non-exempt real estate conveyances. And you can see that brings in between $75,000 and $100,000 the last 3 years. That's obviously not enough money to make up for the revenue shortfalls we talked about, number one. And number two, the county commission has made a policy decision in general to earmark this money, for lack of a better term, to be spent in furtherance of economic development activities. Are there any questions so far about the revenue picture of the last couple of years, the sources of income, anything of that nature? Okay. I think part of the reason the county wanted us to give a talk about county finances is because as elected officials, all of us are affected by the big revenue picture in Preble County, by the certificated amount, etc. So a couple issues that may be in the back of your mind as elected officials come budget time, or when you get that memo that says, hey, 0% budgets this year again. You look at this cash budget, balance of $3.2 million, and you say, well, why can't we use that to help make up for a lack of robust revenue increases? Well, there's a couple reasons. One is, as with any household budget, you need to have a balance in your checking account to account for unanticipated expenses. Number two, these are some numbers from 2008 which they demonstrate a pattern which holds true to this day, and that is when you get that March real estate settlement, that cash balance goes up. And then the county tends to live off that property tax settlement, if you will, until, boom, the next property tax settlement comes in. And that pattern is seen year after year after year. March property tax settlement, cash balance goes up, and then it dwindles down until the next property tax settlement. So that balance is necessary to meet actual real-time expenses month after month after month in between those property tax distributions. Also, there is an issue that needs to be addressed with respect to that cash balance. We received some tax rebates. I'm sure that's not the proper word, but essentially the state completed an audit of Preble County in June of 2010, a 5-year audit, and said, hey, we took $213,000 too much money from you in your sales tax. We're giving you that money back. In September of 2011, they completed a 3-year audit and said, hey, good news, we identified $540,000 too much money, we're giving that back, for a total of $750,000. The frustrating part is, as Mindy has indicated, that the state has represented that for the next 5 years, is that correct, Mindy? It's subject to recall. The minimum of the next 5 years, the state at any time can say, oops, our bad, we did the audit wrong, we want that money back. So when you look at that, that $2.2 million or that $3.2 million cash budget, $750,000 of it has to have an asterisk next to it until the time expires where the state can recall that money. And the final concept I think needs to be addressed is the idea of the rainy day fund. And we talked about that 5 years ago when I gave this similar presentation. The rainy day fund is simply the certificated unappropriated fund. It is the mathematical difference between the amount of money that's been certificated by the county as available to be spent and the amount that's been appropriated by the county commission. It's a mathematical difference, nothing more. If you look at a spreadsheet of county finances, you will not find a line that says rainy day fund with a balance. You won't find a checking account in the Eaton National Bank that says Preble County Rainy Day Fund, here's your balance. It is a mathematical difference. It is the difference between the certificated amount, which as you've seen is a forecast or an educated guess, and the appropriated amount, which is a volatile concept. And by that I mean it's subject to unforeseen expenses at any time. 2009 serves as a perfect example of that. In January of that year, we had certificated $9.9 million. A few months later, that certificate was down to $9.5 million. Why? Because when we were analyzing receipts as they came in and comparing them to our forecasts, they weren't coming in as well as we thought. We had to amend that certificated amount down. So literally overnight, with a stroke of a pen, the certificated amount was reduced by $400,000 without spending one dime of real money. And on the opposite side of the ledger, the expense side of it, you have unanticipated expenses, and I think there are many, but Children's Services Placement costs is a perfect example of that. Children's Services Placements are federal mandates that are administered through Columbus, but much of the cost of those placements is borne locally. And this last slide sort of gives a perfect example of that. You're looking here, the cost on a yearly basis of child placement costs in Preble County, the yellow portion being the amount the state paid for those placement costs, and the blue portion being local funds from our general revenue fund that were used for those costs. 2010, $162,000 from Preble County. 2011, that amount goes up to $250,000. 2012, it goes up to $450,000, unanticipated expenses. So again, that certificated unappropriated fund, that rainy day fund, is not something that can be looked to solve a lack of robust, steady economic growth throughout the county. Where will we be in the next few years? As I've indicated, I think it's important to remain optimistic, but when you look at these numbers and you look at the trends of the big five, there's no reason to believe that those revenue streams are going to increase significantly either this year or in fiscal year 14 or 15. Ohio's growth will not be enjoyed in Preble County. We will not be a part of that until we have some substantial economic development in Preble County, and that's something that our county commission has been working on for at least the last decade, if not longer. Casino revenues are a happy part of the story, but they're not going to make up for a lack of economic development. So we've talked a lot about forecasts, a lot about educated guesses. We know in Preble County that we have dedicated elected officials who work well together and who are creative in serving their constituents. We know that economic development in Preble County, in my estimation, is going to happen eventually. We have too much going for us for it not to. But in the meantime, we also have reason to believe that we're going to have to continue to do our jobs and serve the people of Preble County without seeing a significant or appreciable increase in revenue and without seeing a significant or appreciable increase in our individual budgets as elected officials. That concludes my talk. I'll be happy to answer any questions or open up the floor to Mindy or Brenda if you have questions that pertain to their jobs in particular. Mr. Long, did you wish to say a few words? Or?
Sure.
Great. Wonderful, thank you.
Well, it's interesting to hear. I think your 5 sources of revenue, there's a recurring theme that's going on in a lot of counties, and let me talk a little bit about that. I think what you're seeing across the state is the same thing on interest income. From 2007, we're down about 80% statewide, I think is what the figure says. And it used to be our 3rd single largest source of income to the general fund after sales tax and inside property tax millage. Maybe every now and then the local government fund was a little more depending on how the rates were, but it was either 3rd or 4th, and so we see that. I think you're maybe a little different in a couple aspects. Number one, we're seeing some robust growth in sales tax in some other counties. And particularly if you go to eastern Ohio where all the oil and gas drilling is taking place, we got counties who actually have received 20-30% increase year to, from the previous year because of that. The state is estimating statewide a 6.6 to 6.5% growth in state sales tax revenue. So, again, it's trying to attract that retail. People are starting to buy a little more, but it depends on where they're at. So, you see how that goes in your history, sort of shows you where you are. The other thing that I think we've seen in a lot of counties as it relates to their property tax revenue, down. I think if you go back, help me if I'm wrong, at least what we're seeing statewide is up till 2007, we didn't see an awful lot of counties that actually lost absolutely. Last time that happened was during the Depression. And so what we've seen in a lot of counties is it's rebounded a little bit. So we started seeing a lot of counties that actually got less actual dollars. You never got a great increase, but it was stable and a very slow growth rate, 1.5%, 1.5% a year. That's what we've experienced statewide. And so that's changed. Your figures reflect that. What we've seen, and particularly the urban areas where residential property values have really plummeted, they're hurting generally more than some of the rural counties are. We've also seen, I don't know how it is here, that ag values have gone up. And so where we're stabilizing in some of the rural counties, it's a result of the ag values stabilizing and going up. So the ag values in a lot of counties, and you're not quite there yet, because you're still seeing some reductions. So those are a couple of the differences. The fees, this varies county to county. You got a lot of things in that bucket in terms of various types of fees in terms of that, and that's not a real reliable source in the long term. It's all, that may be your hardest one to project, is my gut when we look at this. So that's sort of where we are. Let me talk a little bit about the legislature. They're home for 2 weeks, but they're locked up behind the doors right now in Columbus trying to figure out what to do with the budget. And we got a couple things that I think concern us a lot as it relates to where your estimates and what a lot of counties have estimated. Let's deal first with the local government fund. And again, a great presentation in terms of the cuts we got, in terms of, I think yours is 884,000 down to 507, if I remember the figures. We've received it's almost half, it's about 47% if you really look at it statewide, and so we've lost that, and we're probably not going to get that back. Now, what the governor has proposed, and again, we don't know anything. You're in jeopardy until July 1st, and then we'll know. And then maybe the Budget Commission will get back together and see what really happened. I think you've done the right thing in terms of playing it as conservative as you have. Our fear, very frankly, was the governor cut that the last 2 years by 25% a year. We were very afraid that he was going to eliminate it. Over the next 2 years, he might have wiped it out. At this point, and this is all volatile, he's not proposed that. What he's proposed is to put us back on what we call a percentage of tax receipts formula. We used to get 3.68% of every state tax dollar that went in to the state. That used to come back to each of the counties through the Budget Commission. Where we're going to end up under the proposal is we probably end up with a 1.69% figure. The 3.68 goes to 1.69. What they're projecting is growth of around 4 or 5% a year, and the aggregate statewide about $20 million worth of growth. But even given that, and you're not one of the counties, 2 years ago, the legislature and the governor, when they did this local government fund thing, they really had a hold harmless for the very smallest counties in this state. Those for the total local government fund for all the jurisdictions, not just a county, was $750,000 or less. And so that, they continue that hold harmless for the very little counties, but guess what happens? That $5 million cost per year to hold those small counties harmless comes out of everybody else's hide. So it really sort of negates, if you take that statewide for the remaining counties, we got about $10 million is what it boils down to that would be increased if it goes this way. However, the real thing that we're in jeopardy with is a proposal in the Senate. Senator Bill Seitz from down in Hamilton County, in Cincinnati area, has proposed for the last 3 years, 4 years, and we've been fighting it back so far, to change the local distribution formula. So you got an alternative formula that the city and the county and the majority of the other subdivisions have said, we like this. This is how we'll do it. What they want to do is change that. And essentially, to make a long story short, it's actually a lot more complicated than this. Underneath that proposal, if enacted, and Bill Seitz will be peddling it in the Senate. We just saw communications yesterday to Montgomery County, to the legislators in Montgomery County from Senator Seitz. No county would receive more than 30% of the total undivided local government fund. In your case, instead of getting 47%, the county government couldn't get more than 30% underneath this proposal. So that's big problems for you, irrespective of what happens in terms of the overall picture of local government fund. Why are we doing this? Well, according to Bill Seitz, here's the reasons. Number one, we all got local government fund cuts. When you look at counties, townships, municipalities, we all got local government fund cuts. We all received some accelerated, we got less money in reimbursements from the old tangible personal property tax and the public utility tax. They accelerated that. My gut is you have no more reimbursements for the general fund.
That's correct.
You have some reimbursements from some, do you have, what levies you got? I can't remember. special levies. You got a DD levy,
We have DD, we have health.
health,
We have,
so you're getting, I'm guessing you get some reimbursements for those special levies, but nothing for the general fund anymore. Okay, that's how it usually works, and I didn't look at your data before I came down, but that's generally how it works. So they got that, plus what else did the townships and municipalities get in terms of cuts that the county did not get? Estate tax. They eliminated the estate tax, or significantly reduced it, and eventually eliminated it for the villages and the townships. And so in Bill Seitz's head, well, the townships and the villages are hurting more than are the county, because they got the estate tax cut also, plus we got the windfall 1% of your certificate of casino money. So the casino windfall means that we ought to take money away from the counties and give it to the villages and townships. We're fighting that off. We need help, actually, on this, particularly in the Senate. So dealing with your senators, hopefully make that known, because you can see what it's going to do. I didn't do the calculations. If you go from 47 to 30%, it's another big cut in terms of what's going to be in the certificate, one way or another. So those are the big things. So we have that. The other thing that's going on, as you all know, that the governor campaigned on and has his mind made up. And when John Kasich gets his mind made up, look out, because he starts moving the tanks forward, and it's hard, and he's really good. We disagree with some of the stuff he does, but they're good. This administration's really good at moving their stuff forward. He wants to cut the state income tax. And how are we going to do that? Well, you got to generate some more money. Well, you know, the two major proposals, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, is that he's going to reduce the state sales tax rate by 0.5%, tax all services, so we're going to tax lawyers, and accountants, and consulting engineers, and laundromats. And you go to the county fair, you don't have to pay the tax on the ticket to get into the county fair, but when you go in and buy the ride tickets, you probably got to pay it. And if you give a free day for the kids, we don't know what happens if the county's paying the vendor directly. It's interesting, but there's a big uproar over that in Columbus. It's probably not going to be the way the governor, at least initially, proposed it. What he also proposed as it relates to counties is you got 1.5% sales tax, so you've done every penny that's authorized under state law. He's also proposed to roll back every county's sales tax rate. So he'd reduce every county sales tax rate by a certain percentage. David, I don't remember. You want 35?
1.2.
You go to 1.2. So this 1.5 rate in Preble County would go to 1.2, and it varies county by county. And some way they've done some estimates that if we tax all these services, you're going to generate a lot more money, okay? And so we're rolling back the rate. So, quote, the counties and transit authorities, who also can do the sales tax in the metro areas, don't get a windfall. So they're taking that out. Then there's all kinds of questions on that as to whether those estimates are right. They would then adjust that 1.2% rate in 2015, again in 2016, on the basis of how the real data came in. Because this is like throwing a dart at a board when you start estimating services. The more, and so many of these are under attack, the more services. They got 85 new services in this basket of services. You start, you know, the heavy-handed lobbyists that come in and get themselves pulled out of it, starting with the lawyers, the Bar Association, right on down. Then we'll see what's left, but it becomes more unreliable in terms of rolling back our sales tax rates. In your case, you're not going to get any additional capacity any way you look at it, wherever it's adjusted to 16. You're at 1.5, that's a maximum by state law. We have actually proposed to the legislature for the last 8 years, asking, even though a lot of commissioners don't want the authority, to be truthful with you, authority to do another 0.5% sales tax. Because there's really no place else for counties that actually have to have the money to go unless you do a property tax. If you do a general operating levy, we had one of those passed in 30 years I've done this, and it's not there anymore. So, you know, people will vote for, often will vote for schools, they'll vote for DD, and they'll vote for children's services sometimes, and the county home, but very seldom we even lose specific levies for sheriff in terms of road patrol. If we can't pass those, we're not gonna pass one for the general operation of the county. So the sales tax is the only thing we've done. So we've supported that. They've not given us that. I don't think we're gonna get that authority. And we have, and it's been somewhat controversial even within our organization, however, we have supported generally a base expansion into the service area. And we've done that because, again, if you look at counties, we've got 48. You're one of 48 counties in the state that's done every penny of sales tax available. And so we either got to have some authority to raise revenue in some ways, or we got to expand the base of that so more things are taxed. And we've taken both of those positions, sometimes not uncontroversial. Those are the big things. The severance tax really won't affect you other than the severance tax proposal the governor has is in effect. We have one interesting proposal I'll just share, particularly for the auditor and treasurer in terms of, and the administration really thinks that they've helped us out in terms of this. It's a non-severance tax proposal, but particularly the counties in eastern Ohio. They've proposed a $25,000 fee for every well that's drilled. Okay, up with these new wells that's drilled. That would go back to the County Budget Commission. County Budget Commission would then sort of do like they do with the local government fund and split it out primarily to counties and townships, although schools would be eligible, as I understand it. The idea being this is to take care of road damage and that type of thing. Well, but guess what? Then you also, once you get that money, then you got to pay it back to the driller. So the auditor would have to keep all these records because you're going to distribute all this money, and then you're going to have to keep a record as to what the mineral tax generates or the ad valorem tax, and you're going to have to refund this to the oil and gas companies. We told them, take it. We don't want to do it. We don't want to go through that. It's just it's a mess. But I raise that because I think it's the type of thing. Actually, Joe Testa, the tax commissioner, thought, "Oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever," and I think they really believe it in some ways, and so they're not helping us an awful lot with that. A couple good things in the budget from our perspective. There isn't a lot, to be absolutely truthful with you. The governor is proposing an increased state share for reimbursements on the public defender in the defense program of about 5%, increasing it from about 35 to 40%. That's about a $7 million state cost a year. So we appreciate that. There are some additional funds. I don't think they're going to mean an awful lot to your county in the community corrections area. They try to divert people from jail, do some programming like that. But we don't think it's come close to what we need given the changes in the sentencing laws. They've thrown a few crumbs at us, I guess, in some ways, but the big stuff hasn't happened. Let me say now what commissioners don't like me to say. Generally, and that is, if you're going to sit around and wait for the state to help you out, you got to wait a long time. We'd love to be up there telling you we're going to land you all this money and do all these things, and we're in there pitching, trying to do that every day. But in the long term, and I guess I've said for the last decade, what you're going to do because of the local officials, how you cooperate and how you do, because we're not going to see any significant help coming out of the federal government in particular and the state government. You're seeing it almost go the other way, where the feds pass it down to the state sort of lets us have it, and we don't have any place to send it. It just lands, we're the bottom of the food chain, is what it boils down to. So those are the main things in the budget. The overlying principle of this budget from the governor's perspective is how do I get a personal income tax cut, both for individuals as it relates to every bracket, to reduce those rates, and how do we do it for small business in particular. They're up there right now working as to how they can do that. I think they want to give the governor some of his income tax cut. What worries me about that, and there's all kinds of stuff floating around up there, I won't even share some of the crazy ideas that we hear up there, but what worries me is if you look at these items we got in the budget, that are big items. You talked about your $300,000 in terms of reimbursement from the 10% homestead and the 2.5%. I think all that stuff starts getting in jeopardy because they've been concerned about the amount of money. If you look at that item in the state budget, statewide, we're talking about $1.6 billion, $1.7 billion, in that range, I think, if I remember the figures right. If you look at the local government fund and the library fund, those are big single pots of money. And when you want to generate $1 billion or $1.5 billion to give income tax cuts, we are in jeopardy because we're the recipients of a lot of those big pots of money, because you can't just go through and take a couple employees out of the various departments. You can eliminate an awful lot of state departments up there that really doesn't make much impact on the state budget. So as we move through this thing in the next 3 months, we got a lot of jeopardy depending on how the politics play of taking care of this income tax cut and those big pots of money, which is our homestead, our property tax credit programs, our local government fund, and our library fund, and also the other one is still a good deal of money in the tangible personal property tax reimbursement, again, that primarily affects levy-funded agencies, not the general fund in most counties. Those are all big pots of money, so stay tuned until July 1st. Let me stop and see if there's questions or even other legislative issues or things you think we ought to be trying to do in Columbus. It's tough sledding up there. I'll give you an example as to how tough this is. We've had some counties that have said for a period of time, let me deal with road vacations, as an example. How many do you get a year? Not many. Couple? Yeah, and we don't have that, but there's an irritant in some counties. You're seeing more of this in southeast Ohio. And the southeast Ohio counties, or you think you guys are hurting, let me take you down to Harrison, Morgan, Monroe, let me take you to some of the places in Appalachia. You won't believe it. But what we ask for is just the authority to recover the cost of the advertising, the mailings, the procedural stuff, a fee. We can do that on annexations. You can establish a fee schedule so that people have to file a deposit, keep track of the records if there's an annexation. You wouldn't believe, I think we got it in the ODOT budget, but these are like big things. And what we're talking about is generating, taking care of $200 advertisements in newspaper. Less than that a lot of times, but so that much. That's the kind of stuff that is even hard to accomplish in Columbus. Let me stop.
There are a couple ways the state of Ohio could help themselves. Is one, the severance tax. I know the governor's proposed an increase, but we're still would be the lowest state out of 8 states that do the drilling.
Yeah.
And the other one is the internet sales tax. And I know you're supposed to be paying that online already, but I think I saw in one of our meetings that it would generate $400 million per year.
For the state, yeah.
For the state.
That's right. And again, there's an awful lot, we see a lot of growth in terms of people going online. Heck, even with my computer skills, I go on and do it now, and buy stuff. My wife does it all the time, too much, unfortunately. And, and actually that probably, there are some ways, and we've suggested that to the administration, we think there's some ways, even without a federal law change, where we can establish a relationship. And there's some federal law on this thing that makes it hard to do, where we could change the state law, but the tax commissioner doesn't appear to be interested because he thinks he's going to get sued, which he probably will be. He probably will get sued if they do some of this. So we're at the mercy of the federal government to pass some federal legislation so that we can do that at the local level. Last week in the Senate, and when they finally passed a budget in the Senate. My God, we finally passed a budget of some kind. Whether you like it or not, they passed one. One of the things that went in there was actually this whole thing that, in terms of the internet sales tax, so that there'd be the ability for the states, it would still take state legislation. We may have a battle there after we get that, but first we got to get the feds to do it, to collect that, so we can collect that $400 million. And that's both state and local share, I think, David. So we got a long way to go with that. And I guess the concern, it will probably be separate legislation, but they got 75 votes in the Senate for it. And of course, the magic number is 60. You got 60 votes, you can pass stuff. And it was sort of a test vote. It was sort of testing the water to see if they'd have support in the Senate on that. So that's one that we hope we could move forward and get a little help on.
And as Marty alluded to, we do have good cooperation within our elected officials, and the commissioners have done our best to tighten our belt even further. And thanks to the CCAO for bringing the electric aggregation, because it saved our county buildings $52,000 last year. And also through other reductions, there's another avenue where we saved $50,000. So just last year, we're coming into this year, we're going to be saving over $100,000, which there's a lot more to go.
Yeah. Well, and I guess at least that's one of the things that we've tried within our association to do, frankly. We were formed to essentially lobby the General Assembly and do the traditional things. We've moved into a lot of non-traditional areas. We've had support with members, a lot of debate about that as to whether we should get into some of those things. But, and you are a county that participates both in our Corsa program, in terms of property and liability. Again, I don't know how but if you try to go on the open market, the coverage isn't going to be as broad, and it's probably going to be more expensive. We did the same thing. I did that kicking and screaming. I didn't really, was scared to death of it. We finally did, as you know, you're members of the Semco program. Hope you're happy with that. Health insurance is a very difficult business, and there's a lot of uncertainties coming up here. One of the things we did, and the board did, and David, you'll recall the debate, very difficult debate, in terms of we actually went on record supporting the governor on his thrust to expand the Medicaid program, in terms of not only as it relates to county hospitals, but how it helps our behavioral health. We're scared to death, and we don't trust the feds. They're supposed to pay 100% now, and until 4 years from now, then they'll be paying 90%. And yet we still see this stuff impact the people that are going to the emergency rooms. It's going into the uncompensated care base. So I'm not sure that proposal is going to stay. We got Obamacare coming along. We don't know what all this health insurance exchange stuff means. We don't know how many businesses continue to keep people. There's a penalty if they don't have health insurance. Some of the businesses we think are going to say the penalties were not as bad as is better than paying the premiums. So we got a lot of stuff changing in health insurance, and that's another sort of unpredictable thing as we move down the road here in the next two or three years as it relates to costs. Because our program is driven primarily by claims. The better you do with claims, we've given all the counties wellness grants to try to do this stuff, and it's long-term stuff, and that's what we're in. We're in the long-term of trying. We're not going to reduce cost, I don't think, in this stuff. What we're trying to do is we're trying to take these curves out so that it's more stable and we flatten the curve as much as possible. And so far we've been relatively successful, but you can have a bad year of claims. And the other thing is, as the economy goes bad, what we see happening is that all of a sudden, we saw this, we had a real bad claims year. One year in Sedco, it was in 2008 and 9. Guess what? Usually county employees aren't too scared of their jobs. They got real scared of their jobs, and guess what happened? Everybody was going to have everything done because they didn't know how long they were going to have their jobs. So those are some things we've tried to do to help out and contribute. The gas is one. We've done some things with telephones and other things, and we've got to be real careful because everybody's trying to sell something every day and has the best mousetrap ever. We got to be real careful because not everybody's got the best mousetrap.
Any other questions for Larry? Alice, how's
I
one?
don't have a question for Larry, I have a question for the commissioners. The money that was set aside for the, I just lost the name of it, the special monies, when you sell a property. Conveyance fee, thank you. Those conveyance fees monies were earmarked for economic development. Can you give me just sort of an idea of what kind of expenditures come out of that money? What kinds of things are being spent for economic development now in the county, just generally?
Presently, we're transitioning, Shonda, over to the Preble County Developmental Partnership. So our amount would be $100,000, $12,000 in kind for her having an office across the road, and $88,000 towards salaries.
Okay, so that money is just being paid for salaries, but what kinds of things are being done to generate economic development besides paying someone?
Oh, yes. I mean, you almost have to hear a presentation because she's got a laundry list of things she's helping. I mean, recently, Alice, one of the best things she did was she saved D&M Tool from leaving the county. They really were going to leave the county, and about 2 years ago, I sat down with her, Sandra Bracington of the governor's office, and Jeff Seward, Lewisburg Village Administrator, and the two owners of the company. And they're like, yeah, we're going to move. And so we sat down and talked to them and said, look, this is what we can help you with. We want to keep you here. And it wasn't 6 months later that they said, yes, we're going to stay here. They are making $1.5 million in improvements, and they're increasing, it was a $1 million payroll to keep in the county that was going to be leaving, that's just one little thing she's working on. I mean, she's got a group together at the state line at Route 40. She's getting the stakeholders together and having discussions with them on getting infrastructure. She's gets leads from the state of Ohio, and when a lead comes in that some company wants to move to the state of Ohio or expand or something like that, she will put the lead in, but a lot of times the limiting factor is the water and sewer. Even though she's identified on the website the lands and the buildings that are available in the county, and she plugs that in where available. But I can just tell you that and obviously, Alice, retention and expansion of existing businesses is by far the best way to grow economic development.
Okay.
So,
Now, I have a secondary question off of that. Is part of her job, or do we have resources to put somebody into this place where they can pursue grants from other funding sources and specifically from ODRC? Because as Mr. Long indicated, ODRC has funding sources. They have like millions and millions and millions of dollars of grants, but people aren't pursuing them. First of all, it's a little bit of a headache to pursue a grant and to follow up with their guidelines, but it can be done. Our court follows up a ODRC grant. It's a small amount of money, and yes, it is a headache from time to time. But there are funds out there. So we already have the Community Corrections Planning Board in place, which is one of the components of getting those monies. So if we had someone in the county, and it can't be me because I can't do this for every. For example, the Sheriff's Department, the Prosecutor's Office, those kinds of places. But if we had somebody within the county who could pursue grants and actually write them and pursue them, I think we would solve a lot of our problems by just pursuing the monies that are out there. Do we have that in place, and could we get that in place? A person like that?
well, I can do tell you, with the economic development, she has gone after brownfield grants, and she also has gone after some recently, it's called 629 funds, is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, Ohio Department of Development, Ohio Department of Transportation, some funds there.
Are we getting those awarded?
Yes, and I don't remember the actual dollars that Lewisburg got, but it was a combination of two different grants where they got, I believe, about $150,000 to help that project. And I'd have to get the exact dollars, but I know she's also, on the economic development side, she's gotten grants for small businesses that were starting out. They may not be large, but it gets those people off the ground and get them up and running.
She's got a revolving loan fund going,
Right.
about $90,000, and she's helped a couple small businesses, and at the expo this past week, she was passing out cards for new and small businesses. If they want to expand and grow, she can apply for some of these funds.
Okay.
She takes care of a lot of the stuff primarily for economic development. What you're talking about is more for the courts and law enforcement and things like that.
But that's bringing money into the
That's
county to
right.
resolve problems that we have within the county. And so I think it should be a part, I don't know if it's part of her office or we need someone who can actually pursue that. But I think we're missing out on a great deal of money.
Mindy,
I totally agree with you, Alice.
Mindy, do you tell me,
Yes.
what's the surplus in that conveyance fee? I think it was $144,000 last week. Is that correct? Somewhere in that range?
The surplus.
And that
in the
conveyance fee for
conveyance.
the Economic Development Department, when they raised it 1 mil, you have it on the bottom of your report every week, down on the left-hand side. What's it this week?
Since its conception.
Yeah, there's an expense, there's a revenue and expense, and then there's a
Yeah, we've got.
a difference there.
Since its conception in September of '09, it's brought in $321,000, and from the Economic Development Department through the general fund, it's had expenses of $175,000.
So you've got over $100,000 surplus in there, correct?
So this is.
But part of that was because by the time we enacted the sales tax, or the conveyance fee, and then by the time we hired the economic development director, there had some build
There
up.
had been some, and in that report, it does reflect that there hadn't been expenses then starting until 2010.
But there's still a
Relatively small in
surplus
nature.
that is, in general, grown most months I think you've been deficit a couple months this year. What I'm getting at is, that wasn't included on your general fund thing with the 753,000, and it's sitting in that general fund also, that you either aren't going to use or using it for backup. My point yesterday was, and last week, is some of that could be used for a revolving loan fund, or as she just mentioned, for a grant writer.
Right
Is
now-
that money reflected in the carryover balance that I saw, I thought? Or is it in the special fund? Or is it
It's
part
not
of
in
it?
the special fund.
Okay, so that, but that money, that part would be reflected in the carryover.
Just bring it up to point.
Any other questions? Well, once again, I would really like to thank Marty and the Budget Commission for a great presentation. It shows us a little bit of history in the future, and Larry, for your insight on what's going on. And I think Larry will probably be around for a little while, and the Budget Commission will too, if anybody else has any additional questions. So, thanks, Marty. Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Randy and Bradley. Thanks, Larry.
Thanks.